It's interesting to look at the new Halloween movies. You know, they're running and screaming. I'm like, aren't you teenagers with cell phones?
And that's our cue to start.
A podcast.
Our streak is going real well. We have not missed an episode so far since we've started. Oh, wait a minute. How do I get this thing?
Back on the podcast porch.
Yeah, Pipecast Porch. Studio A at Rivermont Studios. Yeah, I just want to say before we really get into it, I appreciate doing this. And I don't want to sound too cheesy, but I have a good time doing this. I appreciate being able to do it.
Yeah, man, it's a good time. It's always something to... Yeah, I mean, like, I don't feel like I'm ever having to fill in a void, maybe, or agenda or something. Like, I don't feel... No, that's not the right way. I feel like it is not something that has to be worked into a schedule. It just seems like an easy, good time.
Yeah.
That's the best way to explain that.
I agree.
I don't feel like this is something we have to schedule up.
And not to get too deep into it, but I definitely think when we started doing this, it was just a way for me and Zach to hang out. It's sort of like, why don't we just put a little recording on it?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say the amount of interactions and the amount of feedback and things like that we get, that has really helped it keep going. Of course, we would still hang out either way, but doing this, if it wasn't for the listeners, you know, I'm not saying we're not nothing big, but it still makes us want to keep doing it.
I don't think we expected any type of listener.
Mm-mm.
I remember the first time we got a listener and it was like Croatia or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we were confused about that. We were like, who in Croatia is listening to us? And then it progressively sort of built, out of that. Of course, we're not like completely off the radar of social media and stuff, but like still kind of shocking. It's like, I guess you just go listen to some strangers talking about pipe smoking.
Yeah, and especially in this day and age, like take what the content of it is about. Anybody and everybody is making podcasts or are making podcasts. Like, it's so accessible and there's so much out there. It's like it's an overload. Like, how do you know what to listen to? How do you know what to devote your time to? And, it's just...
Well, the good news is, I guess it covers every niche market you could ever want.
Exactly. And, with the pipe community, even though everybody is making podcasts, the pipe community is still fairly young. There are a lot of YouTube channels and podcasts that delve into pipes, but of course, our end game was always to go beyond pipes. Pipes is a thing that brings us together, but it ain't the only thing that we enjoy.
The interesting thing about pipes is I was around in the first wave of YouTube pipe smokers who are actually no longer making videos.
Really?
Like Pipe Lawyer, I don't think he's made a video in forever.
Public Piper?
Public Piper?
Yeah.
Has he done it? I don't think he's done anything. There was another guy named, he was, I think, Portuguese, and his videos were amazing.
Really?
And he got into a kind of kerfuffle, and then... so it's weird seeing everything sort of come in waves.
Yeah.
So we're in the second generation. So I guess we're part of that.
Yeah, and hopefully we will be continuing to do this, and hopefully this way we'll just keep going. So before we get into the pipes and the tobacco, between the time that we published that one and the time that you're hearing this one, they dropped a little old trailer for Dune.
Mm-hmm.
And I just figured it'd be nice to touch on that a little bit, see what we thought. Outside of that trailer alone, there is a trend amongst movies to take an older rock song, adjust it, add a little chorus to it, and throw it over the trailer. It's been happening for a while, and I blame actually one of my favorite trailers of all time, the Watchmen trailer. I think it started it. It was the first big one, because I remember seeing that trailer and they played it to a Smashing Pumpkins song. I thought, this is the greatest trailer I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, this is incredible. Like just everything hits. There's it's just so cool. And of course, a decade later, they're still doing it. Now, granted, as much as this is one of those things, as much as I want to hate that, every time I've seen it done, I actually enjoy it.
Right.
And so the Dune trailer, you know, the visuals were great. It's what you expect from a Denis Villeneuve movie. It's just, it looks the way his stuff looks. I didn't have any. I've seen a lot of people have a problem with Chalamet. I thought he was fine. Like, he brought it for me. Like, he did most of the dialogue in the trailer, and what he said, I believed. You know, I really like the way he was talking with the Reverend Mother at the beginning. I thought that little interaction was really nice. Yeah, but I enjoyed the Pink Floyd, you know, song on top. I thought it sort of fit well with the emotions of what was happening. Because for people who don't know Dune, you're still sort of like, I don't really know what's happening here, but it's sort of, I don't know, it added to it for me, and I don't know, I'm excited for it. It can only, in my mind, it can only get better from this point, and yeah, I'm just sort of excited to see it. I really enjoyed the first look at the Baron, just the little glimpses we got of him. That's sort of my thought is I think it'll be good, but it may be another case of Blade Runner 2049. It's a remake or a sequel to a cult classic,
Right.
and it's hard to fill the seats, and that's why the trailers have to look the way they do, because they have to appeal to the mass market, not the Dune fanboys
Right.
or fan people. So
I do think that the trailer captured a lot of intrigue that would probably get someone excited who had never been exposed to Dune, the novel. However, I do not like that Pink Floyd song at all. God, I thought it was so annoying. Like, that's just me.
yeah,
I was like, you could have done something. But then I was like thinking, you know, well, this really isn't a trailer for me because my ticket's essentially sold.
yep,
This is something to sort of grab hold of other people. They really
yep,
do need a hit,
yep,
I think, in this instance.
yep,
And I think they're worried that this might be a little fringe, you
yep,
know?
yep.
It might just be a little bit, off the beaten path for general audiences.
Yeah. I went back and listened to the original Pink Floyd song. I don't really care for it. I do like the Hans Zimmer thing that he did to it, but it's probably not the song. It's more that I like music that sort of, I don't know. It's weird. Like do you remember there was two trailers before Stranger Things came out. They did two versions of a trailer. One was
The one that got me was the first one. I think the hook where she's just like, what about the one? 99 out of 100 times. That particular trailer really worked.
and I think essentially both of them were the same trailer, but one, the audio was mixed to make it very horror focused. It felt really suspenseful. The one I'm thinking of is the one that it was almost like it didn't match up. The visuals and everything made you think of what Stranger Things is, but the audio was almost like a triumphant kind of music, and like something you would feel like at the climax of an Avengers movie, kind of.
Oh, really?
And I was like, I really like that juxtaposition of we're looking at horror, suspenseful, sci-fi kind of stuff, but we're getting that kind of music. It was like hopeful kind of music, and I was like, I really enjoy that. So that kind of aspect ties into, I guess, because especially when it first hits, when that chorus of the Pink Floyd hits, it's sort of just, I'm like, and then there's one part where it really cranks up when it's like right when you first see the worm for the first time, when it's swallowing the
mining operation.
Yeah, the mining operation. Like it sort of just gets big, like the orchestral part of it gets big, and the harmonizing gets real big. And it's like, so it makes me, when I hear music like that, like I get goosebumps.
Right.
And so like I look for that kind of stuff. And like I said, so the trend, I'd rather just, have, I guess, just normal Hans Zimmer like music, I guess. But I mean, every time it's not like they take an actual song and just overlay it, except for like Suicide Squad did it with.
Well, Suicide Squad looked like they went into the catalog of everything Warner Brothers had ever produced and just pulled out. I mean, that was the whole film.
Yeah.
It was just like, how can we get every single hit song throughout the century?
It was.
Century.
Yeah, it was like you had a soundtrack, like a CD player, and you were hitting skip every time the scene changed.
Every time a scene changed, it would just be like House of the Rising Sun,
Yeah,
just some Queen song, just whatever.
I think the first 10 minutes you heard 7 different pop culture songs, like from Warner Brothers. It was crazy.
But I mean, it's like I guess they felt like they needed to spend the money. I mean, the movie was,
Well, it was a post Guardians of the Galaxy world, and
and ironically now they've got the director of Guardians of the Galaxy to create the sequel.
like a soft, it's a sequel slash soft reboot kind of thing.
Oh, they're saying it's a soft reboot.
Well, it has a lot of the same characters and the same actors, but they're sort of because the name is just the Suicide Squad. They just put the in front of Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is a sequel, but they're not going to really mention the first one a lot.
I think they had King Shark in it, from what I gather.
Yeah, they got a lot of people. So I think they're actually going to do what they should have done in the first one, because they only did it with Captain or Slipknot. You know, they killed him to sort of be like, hey,
Right.
we're serious. I think they're going to do that heavy. I think they're taken from Deadpool too. You know, where
they just kill a bunch
Yeah.
of people.
I think they're going to do that, but not as much comedic effect, more for just, hey, yeah, like, don't toy around with us.
The problem with that is that like it's not going to have a hard R, so it's not going to have the same.
Yeah. Oh, it's not going to have a hard R? They're not putting one on it?
I don't know. I imagine they wouldn't.
I don't
unless
follow
they're
it.
trying to go this Joker route.
They could.
But I doubt it.
See, I never really. What's crazy about that? Until Deadpool came around, and Logan and things like that, I didn't realize that our movies were harder to make money because I just didn't internalize that. Oh yeah, less people can go see them. So I just never thought. I was like, I didn't think that would influence it. But now that I know that, and it's just like, well, yeah, I guess it is harder to make an R movie.
I think the MPA is kind of a joke, though.
Yeah, because how do you control what a parent shows their kid at home? Which, I mean, that's a big argument for like everything. Like,
I mean, I remember I snuck into like Pitch Black, which is a Vin Diesel movie.
Oh, the Chronicles of Riddick. Yeah.
When I was a kid. I mean, I was like 12 and I snuck in to see it. You know, rated R.
I'm pretty sure I was around that age, maybe a little bit older when I saw Freddy vs. Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Resurrection. When did Halloween Resurrection come out? 2003.
That sounds about right.
I went and saw that in the theater, and I was 12 years old. I was born in 91.
I mean, when you're like 17 is such a peculiar age because I think it's really the age that people start having sex. So, which is really not. You're just not an adult, like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then that's the age I can get into a rated R film.
Yeah.
And I think that's when people start dabbling in like alcohol and drugs. I think on average, that's when you're going to start experimenting with that kind of stuff.
You would think.
So I guess it's like, let's just get them into rated R movies. They're doing everything else.
Yeah. You would think that society, just the way that people try to control society, you would think that they would have already come up with a way to where they started staggering things like that more. Like the age you could buy tobacco, stagger it a little bit more. Well, it already is staggered for most states. Like most states, tobacco is like 19 and alcohol is 21.
That's all 21 now.
Do what?
You know, the law passed. So you can't.
It's federal?
Federal law, I think you have to be 21 now to buy tobacco.
That overrides the state?
Yeah,
Really?
Overrode everything.
That's another issue for another day. I don't think federal law should override state law.
Well,
I think the smallest amount of government should represent, like, if the city of wherever you live says that you can be 15 about tobacco, it don't matter what the state says, no matter what federal says. What they have agreed on is what they should be able to do. The smallest amount of government should control it, whatever it governs. The largest amount of government should not worry about that kind of stuff. They should just worry about defense and
I
things like that.
couldn't agree with you more.
But I can see where they could get in a can of worms. But like
I mean, you can look at San Francisco and see that that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, you know, if someone's from San Francisco and they're complaining about what I just said, I mean, like, why is it that there's San Francisco, I think, like, government that can't do business in certain states? Like,
Yeah.
how can that be a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're a city employee of San Francisco, you can't do business with like Alabama,
Yeah.
Georgia.
It's a peculiar thing. I mean, like, you could go into all the kind of draconian regulation
Yeah,
that you wanted to, but I mean, it just seems strange that you can regulate someone's business dealings outside of California. Like, what does that even, like, it's not, I sort of can grasp it in an international sense,
yeah,
but state to state,
yeah,
it's strange.
yeah. It is. Yeah. Well, to wrap that up, we just wanted to touch on that Dune trailer because as you can tell, we're excited. Just to see that it's Dune, it's Denis Villeneuve, it's got good actors,
It
and
does look really good, though.
yeah, and I think if it's good, because I definitely want to make the point, if the movie is good, I definitely think the Dune people who are actual fans need to go see it multiple times to help. Because it's not going to be the finished product because we need the second one to finish the story of the first book. And the only way that's going to happen, because it's not officially greenlit yet. So the only way that's going to happen is if this one makes money. So if it is good and you think it's good, go see it more than one time to help make that happen.
Wow, I didn't realize that seems like that seems like a high risk.
I know. I'm sure they're going to end it to where if something happened and they didn't make a second one, it would tie up. It, uh, it would be fine, but I hope they don't because to me that would make it less of a good movie.
I thought they had actually filmed everything.
I don't think they have. I think they've only filmed enough for the first movie because that's what they keep talking about is that it's not given that they're going to make it. Well, and they could have filmed everything, but you still got to think about marketing and stuff. The studio may be like, yeah, it's filmed, but we don't want to fool with the marketing, the promotion, and anything like that.
Right.
And we don't want to run the circuit on it. I don't know, but yeah. So that's sort of it. We now we'll get into what you came for. Um, we got a double dose of Dr. Silence today. I'll let Zach start off with his newest addition to his collection.
So, recently I'd had a pipe commission by Chris Kelly. If you guys don't know Chris Kelly, he's the proprietor, maker, pipe smith, pipe maker of Eldritch pipes. And I've always been gravitated towards his design, and the pipes that he produces just seem to resonate in a very kind of specific way with me.
If you go back to episode 1, we mentioned him. I think we mentioned him several times, but if you really want to, like you've been talking about him for a while.
And I've really wanted one of his pipes for a long time. Now, the reason I got kind of cued into him is because I was looking at number 8 slices, trying to figure out if it was something I'd be interested in. I was watching reviews, and I don't know, something about his review, he mentioned it, said you should get a hold of it. And I think what essentially made me pull the trigger. And I liked it so much that I thought, well, like, what's this guy about, sort of? And I sort of investigated his pipes and kind of fell in love with them. But then when I smoked number 8 slices, Chris's sensibility with tobacco was so in line with mine that I just decided, well, I'm probably going to take any sort of grand recommendation that he has because it seems like it could fit. I think sometimes you do somewhat follow a through line with certain YouTubers or tobacco reviews. I know a lot of people read, I have a tendency to kind of respect, not always agree, but respect Jim Inks on tobaccoreviews.com. He's a very prolific tobacco reviewer. He and I don't always see eye to eye, but I like his input. There's a couple other people on tobacco reviews, YouTube, etc., that you sort of pay attention to. And Chris ended up being one of those, so anytime he recommends something, I get a hold of it. So, we will get into that in just a second, but like, I fell in love with this pipe, specifically the Dr. Silence pipe. I think the first time I ever laid eyes on it actually was on Stuff and Things channel. Chris had sent one to him for review, and I was like, that's amazing, that's a beautiful pipe. I wanted one, I just could never figure out the timing. So I went ahead and ordered one, commissioned one from him. And it's an orange Cumberland stem with a yellow and chocolate stain. It's straight grain, smooth, no sandblasting or anything, with a plateau top. It's about 7 inches long with a 2-inch deep bowl. And that's kind of the mechanics of it. But that's not really what you guys care about. What you care about is whether or not it smokes well. And, I thought about this for a long time because I think everyone, when I came into pipe smoking, which had been about 2006-ish, something like that, about when I was 19, back when you could smoke when you were 19, and I got a couple of pipes. I got a cheap Sassini and Bjorn pipe, which sort of reminds me of this pipe, just a more kind of reduced version of it, which is just a straight billiard shape. With sandblast, and that's what I started on. But the Sassini was the first English pipe I'd ever had, and I remember loving that pipe. Still have it. It's kind of straight with a sort of an oval shank and matching stem. I think the stem, it's a saddle stem with what appears to be a billiard bowl, but it's sort of squat like a pot, but it sort of flares like a doublet shape. So there's a lot of things going on with that pipe that's very peculiar, but very lovely. So I collected Sassini pipes because I like them so much, and of course, Sassini is a part of the 4 big, in my opinion. Sassini, Dunhill, Ashton, and Les Woods, or Ferndown. And I have a pipe from each of them. I only have one Dunhill. I don't think there's anything particularly special about Dunhill, except that it's sort of the grandfather of English pipes. Dunhill spun off the other 3 that I mentioned. Sassini was the first to be released from the Dunhill, but they designed Sassini. I can't remember Sassini, the kind of the patriarch Sassini, but he designed and built pipes for Dunhill. Spun off into his own company, Sassini. Ashton did the same thing in the 80s, and then the silver worker, Les Woods, is that his name? I could be wrong, but Ferndown. He ended up started doing his own pipes. I think Ferndown is actually the superior of the big 4. If I were to tell you if you want to buy a traditional English pipe, specifically the big 4 that spun off of Dunhill, I'd say get a Ferndown or a Les Woods pipe. Now that's not to take away from other English pipes. There are tons of English pipes. I'm not saying that, and they're old, collectible. They're, I'm sure, new. Those are the 4 that I particularly gravitate towards. I think Blakemore and Northern Briar are very good. I hear good things. Never smoked them. Can't really comment, but I would just, I'm sure they're great English pipes. But really, after those, after Ferndown, I think they're still producing, not maybe at the level that they were, but I pretty much said, well, the English pipe making tradition is dead. It's pretty bold, but that's the way I felt about it. I didn't think that anything original or interesting were coming out of it. So I gravitated. I've never really gravitated towards German pipes. I've smoked a few Danish pipes, a few French pipes and things like that. But I just moved to the neoclassical shapes of the Italians, and I've pretty much hovered in Italian briar and Turkish meerschaum ever since my last Ferndown I purchased. I don't really care so much for English pipes anymore, up until I saw Chris Kelly. And I'm here to say that Chris Kelly has entered my 5. He's in the 5. He's in the big 5. As a matter of fact, I think that the best English pipe, that you can purchase right now is a pipe from Chris Kelly. Now, granted, I have not smoked Blakemore or Northern Briars. I believe those are English pipe makers. There's actually a great video where Chris Kelly does an interview with both the pipe makers at Blakemore and Northern that you should watch. But outside of their years of experience, which I'm sure would make for a great pipe, the level of detail, beauty, and just mechanics of the Chris Kelly Eldritch pipes, the Dr. Silence pipe, is just unparalleled. It smokes far superior to any of the Dunhills I've smoked. It smokes far superior to the Ferndown pipes I've smoked, and it is just on another level of pipe making. It seems like he's really cued in. He makes his own stems from a resin, and I don't know where he acquires his briar from. I'm sure it's Italian, most of them are, but there's a possibility that it's Algerian or Spanish or something else. I don't know how he procures it or where he gets it from, but um, smoke's cool. The deep bowl is long lasting. Uh, it's a very good reading pipe. I love it, and that's what I've really been reading um, to lately. Just kind of getting down the mechanics of the pipe, and just sort of understanding what I was going to be talking about in this episode. The interesting thing is that the pipe actually requires fewer lights because of the chambered sort of chimney chamber that it's got going on. And it's crazy because I've set this pipe down when I was playing D&D the other night. I was puffing away, puffing away, puffing away, and then I had a bunch of things come up in game, and then I think my wife actually asked me to do something, and I was doing this and that. I swear I was away from my bowl for 40 minutes. I came back and picked it up and put it in my mouth, ready to light again, and puffed twice, and there it was. The ember was still lit, almost with some sort of otherworldly, eldritch, peculiarity is what I'll say to it. But the pipe is really good. I truly think, I mean, as a matter of fact, I've already made plans to do another commission for a Slender Man next year. Because I don't see the point in actually purchasing Italian briar anymore, or Italian pipes anymore, because Chris has got literally, there are at least 6 pipes of Chris's that I want to buy. The Slender Man will be the next one. I want the Prince of Darkness. His sensibilities are just on target with how I like my pipes to look. Now remember, this is all aesthetic. I truly believe that you can get a good smoke out of a corn cob. I do not shy away from that. But I do think if you want a briar, you want something from an artist. And this is where, like, there is another episode in the making, I'm sure, where we can talk about artistry and the arts and how I interpret it, But this, to me, much like backing up a giant 18-wheeler into a closed confined space, is an art. Like, I don't think, like, photography and painting and stuff really, I don't really consider them, like, artistry. Now, I'm sure someone would argue with me pretty heavily on that, but that's just my opinion. I think that there is less art in the social kind of aspects of, like, the business of the art community versus, like, something that's done, sort of in a love of the thing that actually puts bread on the table. Not something that gets you sort of a snobbery upper crust, It's an interesting thing to me. That's why I think the art sort of died around the 18th century,
Yeah, but you're saying just because that art stopped being, what you said, a way to provide for your family, and then became just a sense of
it just seems like it stopped. It
celebrity.
started being this weird cabal of people who really and truly made art what it is. They've established it, and they've recognized that they codified it, and they allow it to be viewed by the public. Well, back in the day, it was sort of someone commissioned something for themselves that paid for you to do whatever, and then you could do a private painting or something like that because you did it for the love of painting, but you did the private sort of commission to kind of carry on with what you loved, and you still were able to feed yourself, as opposed to art for art's sake, which I think is vain and kind of silly. Where it's just like, I'm an artist, and then it doesn't seem like you have any practicality. Because I think when you have to do something practically, say do a portrait with like an aristocrat or something, there's a practicality and a humility that comes with that actually I think feeds into the art. When you can just like paint squares or do a Jackson Pollock painting, and it's basically by committee that they decide that you're a celebrity, I think it's ultimately pointless. So kind of, I'm sure that is a really long aside. To get back to what I was saying there, I think Chris Kelly's a true artist, and he makes incredible pipes. Which, because I got the Dr. Silence pipe, of course, you have to pair it with something that is steadfast, long-lasting, cool, and delicious, which is why Chris Kelly partnered with Byron Ventures to create the Patience of Dr. Silence.
Which is what we are smoking on now.
That's right. And we've been smoking this since the last episode. I'd acquired some, and I hooked Patrick up with it because I wanted him to have a pretty long entanglement with it for this episode, because I knew that this is specifically what we were going to be talking about.
Yep, and if you have followed along at all, at least with our social media efforts, we've been smoking it a lot. Like Zach, I've been smoking it while reading the stories that we'll get to later. But it is a I can't really put my finger on it yet. What makes it, I guess, so attractive of a smoke? But it's got it's just got something to it. What really struck me the first time I smoked a bowl was the room note. Just it had a great room note. Had a great retrohale, and those are just some things that I try to take in the first time I smoke a blend, and when I revisit blends, and it really gave it something. It's just like, man, I want to do that again, kind of thing. The last thing you want, in my opinion, when you smoke a tobacco is to be like, well, I don't want to experience that again. With this blend, it's just like, just keep going back to it. I mean, and it wasn't for this episode. It was just, I want to. I want to do it. Now I mixed in a little bit of that Virginia and Overdrive, which we talked about last episode, just to break it up a little bit. But man, yeah, this stuff is really good. Now, Zach, you'll have to go into the details and what's in there, but I enjoy it.
Well, I will say that, and this isn't a complaint, he's a very busy man, and I don't care if he never speaks to me again as long as he's creating tobacco that I can purchase. But I did reach out to Byron. I don't think that's actually his name. But I did reach out to the website, basically inquiring about it, and they did respond. So but he's very busy. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but there are a lot of October blends coming out. I recently just purchased Zombie English. I plan on actually getting a couple bags of Plague Bringer. But we won't go into that too much. Those are future reviews. But I did reach out. He did respond, said he needed time to think of my questions, and I will, answer them. And when he does, I will, read them off what he answered in a, future podcast. But I straight told him, I think that this is an incredible blend. One that actually reminds me of blends that I smoked by Steve Books, who was a tobacconist in Oregon. I think he recently passed away, maybe a couple years ago, but I mean, it's fairly recent. But I smoked his blends in 2012. He had tobacco that had been aged upwards of 40 years. I think that you actually might to purchase some of this tobacco from his daughter. The price gouging that she put on it were pretty crazy. Like, I think it's like, some of them are like $70 an ounce or something insane like that. When I purchased it, it was not unreasonable,
Yeah.
I compare what Ken Byron's did specifically with the Patience of Dr. Silence to things that I've smoked by Steve Books. There is a weird sort of mythical age to the Patience. And I don't know if he has somehow acquired Virginia that is aged in the upper 20s, 30s. I can't really explain it, but like, that's the way it tastes. Of course, it's exotic Virginia is what he says. Maybe like an African or something. I really didn't look into the components too much. I know you can taste the sweetness of the Virginias. They're there, subtle. The Kentucky is there, and it kind of gives it this like sort of meatier quality that I really like. Not like literally meat, but I mean, it gives it like a more robust flavor. Because there is nothing savory about this blend, in my opinion, because of the Tonquin flavoring, which actually gives Tonquin, to me, everyone says it's sort of like, it's like vanilla, but you can't put your finger on it. And I'll go a step further and say that Tonquin flavoring to me is sort of, if you could take a Thai tea, if you guys have ever tried Thai tea, I think I've said this before in a 1792 review. If you could take a Thai tea and sort of drink that in between bites of caramelized vanilla. Some sort of like caramel, vanilla, fudge. I don't know. Like I wouldn't say fudge because fudge has its own sort of properties. But like if you could take vanilla and sort of caramelize it with a sugar and a butter, that's sort of the flavoring you're getting in between sips of the Thai tea. Whenever you take a bite and then sip the tea, that blending sort of tastes like Tonquin. And the most easy way to like sort of straighten that out would just to be like it tastes like caramelized, caramel and vanilla. It's sort of a darker, richer vanilla flavoring to me. And I like that. I think the Tarquin is probably the best, you know, additive to tobacco that you can get, specifically if you are an enjoyer of aromatics. And, you know, that's all you can say about the components, really. I mean, like, it's shocking how good it is. You know, I truly think that you don't really need to age a blend more than a couple of years, because ultimately it's kind of a weird thing where it's like if you age a blend for a couple of years, what you're doing is making sure that the tobacco is sort of meshed, that the flavors sort of
are married
consistent, across the board. That's what you're looking for, ultimately.
Yeah.
That's a 2-year to 5-year process. 5 years if you want to give it. But then there's this weird thing that happens that if you forgot about a 10 for 40 years, there's a whole nother thing going on with it. Now, I've had tobacco that is that old, older than me. However, that's not exactly something you're just going to be able to get your hands on all the time. The Imperial, I can't remember what it was called. Steve Brooks blended something called Imperial something or another. And it sort of had that same flavor profile, a little bit more stout, but the same flavor profile as the Patience of Dr. Silence. The interesting thing is about the Patience of Dr. Silence is like, I don't think he explicitly said that he had acquired 30-year tobacco. So it has the same kind of, I can't explain how aged tobacco tastes. It's just, like, when I say aged, I mean aged. 5 years is not aged to me. 5 years is marrying. Like, you know, that's like it's a marrying of a profile. Age is like, I've vaulted it, and it's got to be, it's almost like it acquires a must of time. But the must isn't unpleasant. It's just hard to put your finger on. Well, to say that I love this blend is an understatement. I mean, like, I literally don't reach out to tobacconists and ask them specific questions, not necessarily to try to crack the code of what exactly they did to the tobacco, but just sort of like to kind of get his understanding of where he was coming from. Like, and I was curious if he intentionally tried to make it a long smoke, because you can smoke this for a very long time. It's an all day, except the limited the limited quantity that you can acquire. I don't recommend smoking on it all day. I recommend vaulting this up and never letting anyone touch it. It's just that good. I mean, like, you know, I think that's I think, what is it called? You know, it's like a small batch blender, condiment blender. You know, that's sort of what Ken Byron is. I mean, he's very, I think, in the limited quantity that he, you know, produces, you know, I think it almost leads to have, like, I feel like he allows tobacco to be discovered and enjoyed, but he doesn't put everyone in a position to hoard to such an extent that you'll never get to try it. I mean, his stuff is available. Granted, I think I was in a fight for Zombie English, and I think his site crashed or something like that, or his queue crashed because we were all like reloading the page because he had a 4 o'clock drop, and I think everyone jumped in. I barely got what I needed.
Oof.
But yeah, I think Zombie English sold out in something like 2 minutes.
Jeez.
And I acquired a couple of bags of it, you know, for Patrick and I to review and talk about. This is the last year he's going to be able to blend it.
How many years has he been blending it?
I think this is the 3rd year.
Oh.
So 2018, 2019, and 2020.
We could have been smoking on it.
It does stink that we are sort of behind the curve a little bit. That, like, I probably should have thrown in with Ken Byron. And not, I think I was too busy chasing blends that I think everyone seeks. I mean, we got a hold of what? Peacehaven, we got a hold of Blackpool, Penzance, talking about Esoterica here. Stonehaven. I think we were just so preoccupied with finding these blends, which is ironic because the blends that I actually like and they're not esoterica blends. Woodbridge is another one I was trying to acquire. The blends that I was trying, that I actually like, are actually all were readily available. You know, I was
Yeah.
getting the stuff that I like regularly with no problem, but I think I was consistently chasing like this mythical smoke just so I could, you know, I'm sort of a cynic because I really do just smoke things to prove that they're not that great. That you could literally buy, you know, a GOP's blend, a Cornell and Dill blend, you know, one, or, you know, I think really the Scandinavian Tobacco Group has some of the best tobacco on the market. You can buy something from them. Samuel Gawith, harder to find, sure. And Gawith and Hogarth, harder to find. Ironically, no one smokes their aromatics, which are the best thing that they produce. So, like, those are not hard to find. They have had a shortage here lately trying to get through, I think, FDA and trying to get, you know, in. And I think there might potentially be a distribution disagreement where they're actually finding a different stateside distributor. Because I think Arango Cigar,
Yeah.
they might have had a falling out. I think they're the ones that actually do the importation and distribution in the States. But I think that there might be a falling out, so now they're trying to find a different distributor. That could be a rumor. That's what I heard. But the point is that their aromatics, literally the best. And that, you know, and I think in that vein, you know, that's what you should be, you know, going after, and you should be smoking what you love. But I think as you know, fellow pipe smokers and podcasters, it's our obligation to give you the nitty gritty. Because, I mean, I don't think Stonehaven's, it's definitely not better than Aged Burley by Solani. It's like, it's absolutely not better than that, you know? Penzance, I think that there isn't a GOP's Latakia blend that doesn't just absolutely beat the tar from Penzance. Penzance not that great. Margate's really good. But Margate is so readily, that's what's so funny. Margate is actually the easier one to find because no one wants it. Yeah. But Stonehaven and Penzance are nothing to like go, you know, fishing for.
Margate, Pembroke, and Soda Bed are like the only ones I would ever go out of my way to get. And they're the most
disliked.
Yeah.
No, they're okay. Ramsgate and Blackwood are really good, but I like licorice. So if you don't like licorice, steer clear. Which is interesting because Zombie English has a very and Soda Bed characteristic to it. So.
Oh well, then I'm going to really enjoy it more than likely. When I started smoking with you, you were sort of at the tail end of that quest to get the things you've always seeked, the Stonehavens and all that stuff, and you were at that little grace period where you started to realize this really isn't worth it.
Right.
It's what I've enjoyed has been available this whole time.
Right.
So luckily, it's almost one of those things. I've said this before, and I've probably said it here. I know I've told you. There's this idea, theory, philosophy that 90s kids feel nostalgia more than any other decade, any other group, because they saw so much technological change in a short period of time. Because, I mean, same with you, I went from not even having a computer in the house to now having one in my pocket 24/7.
Right.
So, like, you know, granted, I never saw black and white television, you know, there was always black and white and color. But I definitely, you know, I got to see technology and the way it's expanded. I say that to say that I sort of got a similar experience with tobacco blends by starting to smoke. My beginning journey co-aligned with your sort of realizing that. Mm-hmm. My early part was you still on the search for Stonehaven.
I think I would search for Stonehaven for almost a decade. Yeah. You guys are going to remember, I'm not going to time out a website too much. So ultimately, I was going to find Stonehaven in a brick and mortar, which is where I found it. The search becomes a little bit more difficult if you don't want to actively hunt and pursue so vigilantly that it's almost like every day you wake up, you're checking your notifications, around the clock. I'm too busy to really be doing that.
Yeah, and so because of that, I got to sort of experience the hunt for what everybody always hunts for, with you. But then in a very rapid, state of things, and just the way things happen, Dunhill went away, but then came back with Peterson. All that happened in my first year, 2 years of pipe smoking. So I sort of got to get all that, and now I've gotten, which I've always sort of had that idea that if I just find the blends that I like, there really wouldn't be a need to continue to hunt more. If I find just, a everyday blend or everyday smoke from every blend, an everyday vapor, everyday English, things like that. So I'm sort of happy about that, we got to do the Stonehaven thing. We did the Penzance, all the esotericas. And now it's just like, you know what, let's just, whatever's good. And for some people that are a little bit smaller, like Ken Byron, not saying he's small, but compared to...
I think it would be safe to say that he is a small operation.
Yeah. Because, like, the next...
And it's not insulting either.
No.
Because, like, to put that in perspective, he's a small operation, but I haven't smoked anything from him yet. And I've smoked Sakura Moriarty, The Patience Dr. Silence, Zombie English, Darkfire Cherry, and Verge Engine Overdrive. That's a pretty good amount.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a misstep yet.
You can't say that about another tobacconist.
No, I can't say. I can say that other blenders are usually the best. The best is a 60-40 split. 60% of the time, it's going to hit really well. 40% of the time, not so much.
Yeah.
That's almost, that's 50-50.
And it can range too, right?
And so far, Ken Byron has stepped to the plate and crushed it every single time. That's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah.
Considering, I mean, like that. Now, granted, there are a bunch of other blends that he's got out there. Some that are less interesting to me, and that I will eventually get to sometime. Like I think a burly morning pipe and stuff like that. I'll eventually navigate to, and maybe that will be a misstep. But I think with the amount of blends he has, he's really killing it.
Yeah, and one final note, like I guess the smallest when it comes to the smallest blenders would be your brick and mortars, if they blend in-house stuff. That's like your small guys.
But
But most of the time they do aromatic.
Yeah, they mostly do aromatics, and I'm not too impressed with them.
No. So, needless to say, if you take anything from this episode, you should definitely check out Chris Kelly. You should definitely, if you like them, and if you want one, get a pipe.
Right.
Commission one from him. And then also try the Patience of Dr. Silence if you can.
If you can get a hold of it. I think it's sold out twice now.
At least give Ken Byron Ventures a shot.
Ken Byron Ventures is amazing. So
I feel like the next 5 episodes are gonna all be Ken Byron blends.
I do think so too.
So if you don't like us talking about that,
you're going to have to, I think we're in a position now, because we've gone through some of the major blends. I mean, like, the major, like, everyone talks them up. So now it's time to actually just discuss things that we enjoy, and we don't have to explore all these mythically great things that are actually terrible.
Yeah. Now switching over. We did a lot of homework for this episode, I would say, for this section we're getting into. It's October. Things are getting spooky, and it's a good time to sort of dive into a little on the spook side. So we will begin with the classic from H.P. Lovecraft, The Color Out of Space. Now, I believe, going back and listening to our early episodes, I had never read this before now. But I remember you saying that it was one of your favorites of his.
Yep.
Which you have a different, you have a more realistic approach to him. There are people out there who either don't know him. This is the majority of people, right? The majority of people, I'd say half the people don't know him. The other 40% think he's a god. You're in that 10% that's like, yeah, he brought something to the table, but I mean, sometimes execution ain't there.
Right.
Uh,
He isn't always the greatest writer in the
yeah,
world. He has a classic case of, I built something pretty incredible. I would much rather ruminate on the idea
yes,
than sort of give the character volition and purpose. It does seem like it's a very expository exercise,
yes,
which isn't always bad. I've mentioned this before. I do like exposition sometimes.
yeah,
Um, I don't think that it's necessarily a writing faux pas, but like there are times when there the exposition, it can't just be only exposition.
yeah,
You're going to have to let something transpire. I think. I think. Um, doesn't mean that like I can't be carried away with what Lovecraft has created, specifically in the color out of space, but it does seem like you're getting a almost like a fourth hand account of it. It's always like a guy who wasn't there who talked to an old man whose father witnessed it. Like it seems like there are things like that happen, and this is a general
yeah.
thing, Lovecraft. Um,
But I would say
that's pretty much accurate to the color out of space,
but
minus the second.
yeah. But I would say that, and it almost you could look at it from this perspective, from that kind of idea, it gives credence to the unknown of the story. Is that what has been changed in the different accounts? You know what I'm saying? Because we all know that stories get exaggerated and
Well, that's very
parts
true.
get left
However,
out.
the problem with that is that there is never, in so
Mhm.
far as we know,
Yeah.
outside of potential suggestion, there has never been a time where Lovecraft is actually, man, I don't want to say this too absolute, but from what I gather, there has never been a time that he's written where you're supposed to say that there's an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because a lot of this, what's symptomatic of the human condition in a Lovecraft story is insanity and
Yeah.
them going insane, which would actually sort of lead itself to, or give itself to an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
But I don't think he ever really, you don't get you're not suspicious of what the narrator's saying.
Yeah, there's no subtext, no clues that make you think you should be questioning the narrator.
Right.
Which is actually funny is, as much as like I don't always want an unreliable narrator, it is funny that humans in and of ourselves are unreliable narrators, even to our own stories and our own memories, because our minds usually misremember things a lot. And of course, events have their own bias to the perspective of the person in the event, right? Me and you may be in a car crash, but your perspective of the events may be completely different than mine, other than the fact that there was a car crash.
Well, there's a well-known argument that like lies can actually become embedded in your mind as memory, to a point that like they were using some of that as hearing something and then sort of misremembering and then sort of creating it. What I mean by that is they use that argument for comedians who still jokes that they actually heard it in a set, and then the joke isn't the same, but they're so similar that it would look like he had lifted it. Well, he did, he just doesn't consciously remember it, which can be problematic because the person thinks that that was an original idea. In hindsight, they probably did, in fact, hear it, not remember hearing it, and then conjuring up this subsequent idea.
Yeah, yeah. And I've learned to a sort of different kind of perspective on that. I've realized that, at least from the creation aspect, that, I heard somebody say this the other day, and I don't remember who it was, but like, you gotta sort of read, you gotta know what's out there before you can create, kinda. Or you got to, from a certain perspective, if you want to write scary stories, you should be well read in scary stories.
Yeah, it's pretty much par for the course. Stephen King says that in his book on writing. Several writers say that the first instrument to writing is being well read.
Yeah, but see, that's where I'm getting to with me, is that I like to be a writer, but I or anything like that, a creator, but I'm sort of limited in a lot of things. There's a lot of things, like I know I've come to you with ideas before, and you're like, one of the best examples was I came to you with an idea. This is when we worked together, and I told you the idea, and like off in the distance, a coworker goes, "Oh, that sounds like 4 rooms." I was like, "Oh crap, that's already been done." But I hadn't seen it, so I didn't know.
Right.
So like I'm sort of on that journey outside of this right here in my own personal life. I'm on that journey to, if I'm gonna write a story that's around this, I want to make sure I'm not treading on it. But then also you run into that aspect of, if you watch or read too much of something, then it sort of influences what you're gonna do. So like, I don't know, what is the better way? Know everything that's out there and then try to avoid it, or just do something, and if it just happens to be similar, just change a few things, because you may create something completely brand new,
Right.
and you not know it, or I don't know, because you definitely want to be influenced, but you don't want to. I don't know. You don't want to steal wholesale from people.
Right. I mean, like, but I think that, like, it's a complicated notion that you're mentioning, because I think Tarantino steals wholesale, and I'm pretty sure the Stranger Things guys still wholesale, because their just stuff doesn't seem very original to me.
It's just the way they piece it together. Well, I would say for both. Well, not for Tarantino. Tarantino, we'll get to him later. With Stranger Things, I've always been like, they steal moments.
Mm-hmm.
What pieces the moments together is traditional.
Right.
May not be completely original, but they take things that are nostalgic from a visual, emotional perspective for the 80s, I guess, predominantly. And they piece it together with a story that could be a very familiar story, but at least it becomes original by the piecing and the content of it.
I will say that characters, if they didn't have strong, sort of recognizably independent characters, and this is for Tarantino and what are the Duffer Brothers?
Yeah, the Duffer Brothers.
I think that their stuff would fall immediately flat, because you can identify with the kids in Stranger Things and, like, say Jules, or one of Tarantino's characters.
Yeah.
It's even hard to do with Tarantino, because I feel like he literally steals so much. He steals characters. I mean, even Django, he couldn't even come up with an original name. He just took Django from Django Unchained is just Django from the Django series.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. He can't. I mean, Inglourious Bastards, he just stole the title. Inglourious Bastards. It's hard to defend him, but like, his characters are likable, and his stuff is schlocky enough and entertaining enough that he pulls people in. Luckily, people don't watch all of the movies that he's watched.
Yeah.
I have
to know that.
so it's problematic for me.
But I would even say that I would argue that even his characters aren't that great, because most of his characters are just the actors. Like, every Samuel L. Jackson character is just Samuel L. Jackson.
That's true.
Every Christopher Waltz character, or Christoph Waltz, is Christoph Waltz. Like, every Kurt Russell character is Kurt Russell, pretty much. Like, in his earlier days, it's different, but in his Tarantino stuff, what's really the difference?
Right.
So, like, does he really create good characters, or does he just know how to cast good actors?
I think Tarantino is so obsessed with what he wants to see from what he's already seen, that he knows exactly who he wants to cast.
And by you saying what you just said, that's how I view myself in my writing, is that I want to see the essence of what I've already seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have some kind of self-awareness to know, don't copy. But also, I'm not as talented as him. I don't know. I guess when you do fully steal, it doesn't matter how talented you are.
It does seem, it's a very strange question.
We didn't even mean to get onto this.
Yeah, it's one of our things is like running a rabbit. We're trying to get back to Color Out of Space. So I think that, Color Out of Space is definitely one of my favorite Lovecraft stories, even though it does have that sort of second, third-hand account aspect of guys trying to prepare this little valley for a reservoir that's being built, and then through his survey, he finds a particular portion of that little area, west of Arkham.
Yeah,
Arkham,
the Blasted Heath.
The Blasted Heath. And he even says it's so theatrical of a title that he wants Why would you call it that? I mean, it was such a strange thing. It just seemed like some very countrified, goofy thing until he actually sort of comes upon this super dead, grayed out
Yeah,
moonscape, essentially.
it was. So my experience with Lovecraft has been Call of Cthulhu, The Outsider. I attempted to listen to At the Mountains of Madness, which I just kept thinking, this is the thing almost. Well, which, that was before the thing, but still, I was just sort of like, well, they're very close to what the thing is based off of. Came out really close to the time At Mountains of Madness came out. Either way, I don't like the way At the Mountains of Madness is presented. I don't like that style, whatever it is. It's sort of like, I don't know what it is. But I've had my trouble, with Lovecraft. But when I started Color Out of Space, now granted, I watched the film first. I was very happy with his execution of the story because I think he just sort of did it right from the perspective. You start with the main character, and then that main character, you get to know him, kind of. And then he is relaying the story, which is fine. But when you open up with just some guy reading, you're reading some journal entry of somebody who references somebody that saw a cult in Louisiana, like, what? Like, just give me something, you know what I'm saying? So I really enjoyed the story, the way it carried through.
It is a little bit more closer knit, even though he is sort of telling the story. Who's telling the story? Who's telling the story sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, he speaks to Ami, who speaks to Hubert or Nahum, and Nahum, and then Nahum speaks. It's kind of confusing because those names are just so Old Testament.
Yeah.
And then Nahum, relays to Ami in the past about what he saw his wife do, and Ami relays that story to our protagonist. It can be frustrating.
Yeah, but at least in this one, I felt it felt a little bit more cohesive, and yeah, I really just enjoyed the whole goings on. It's a pretty typical story. Now, granted, I was trying to explain it to Anne. I was like, it's hard to understand this story in a 2020 aspect because we know that there's only a certain amount of colors that our eyes can see. So the idea of there being a new color couldn't really happen. But I was like, but I would venture to guess if you were somehow genetically or if your DNA was altered to perceive more than what we can perceive, then maybe you could see a new color then. But like just naturally, a new color just can't crop out of nowhere.
Right, we're not what is it, pistol shrimp, who can see
at
least like quadruple the range of any.
Really?
Yeah, their color spectrum is like so much more advanced than ours.
So if you splice some of their DNA into ours, you might could start seeing new colors. Now, what's interesting though, well, I'll say that for our next bit, but yeah. So I was trying to explain that. So if you take that part out of it, right? You take the idea that really there wouldn't be a color. If you just sort of if you take the idea that it is just a weird color, it's a weird tinted color that we all know. The meteor comes crashing down. It's emitting this weird color. It's actually shrinking in size. It keeps getting smaller, and then it sort of feeds on everything around it, the land, the people. The story is just that happening,
and then it sort of destroys everything in its wake, and then ascends.
Yeah, it ascends, and it just, of course, leaves the wake of the people in its path. Right. How it affects the people.
Right.
It's a very very cool idea. We talked about this, outside of the show. That somebody said that every story is one of two stories of somebody leaving or somebody coming to a town.
Right.
Whatever. It's sort of that. The meteor comes to town, then leaves.
Which is interesting too, because there is another aspect. So to give you guys some perspective, we read this, we watched the film Color Out of Space, and then we also read another short story by Algernon Blackwood, the guy who wrote the John Silence character, which the Dr. Silence pipe is based off of. Guys, give you guys some connections here.
Yeah.
We read his story, The Willows, which Lovecraft deemed one of the greater English horror stories or supernatural stories ever written. So I do kind of want to queue up on all three of those and kind of keep you guys in perspective. to piggyback off of what Patrick said, yes, there is that whole a stranger comes to town or someone goes on a journey aspect. Another thing that I've always heard is there are two types of horror. There's the fear of the unknown, what is outside of the best example I think was John Carpenter said that if a group of people are sitting at a campfire, there's two types of horror. There's the fear of the outside of the light, everything that is an unknown quantity that could kill you, harm you, or abduct you or whatever. It's what we do not see. It's beyond the veil, beyond the light, right? And then the second story is we're the horror. The evil is within us. One of us is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Sort of like the 10 Little Indian kind of Agatha Christie
Oh,
thing, where it's like,
and then there were none.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of has an aspect of that, where it's like the evil is within us, or it is among us. So that's kind of like the two types of horror stories.
So you said Carpenter said that?
Carpenter has said that. It's been said before, but I like the one that sticks out in my mind is what he said, which is what I just kind of tried to convey.
What's so interesting to me, so everything that I love about cinema and the month of October and Halloween, it all comes from John Carpenter and Halloween 1. Granted, Halloween 2 definitely holds a higher place in my heart. I know it doesn't in his heart, and I can understand why there are problems with it. But Halloween essentially is what has done it for me. So I say that because Halloween sort of does both. Michael is a external fear. He is outside the light. He's a fear of an unknown for the people in the town. You don't know what he's going to do. Well, you know what he's going to do, but you don't know if he's going to come for you. The genius of it being on Halloween, everybody's in a costume. You don't know who's going to get you. So it's an unknown feeling. But even though he perceives Michael as a force of evil, but still, if you try to ground the movie, which is how I've always felt about the first one, ground it as best you can, he's just somebody who's gone mad. And that could be you.
Yeah.
You could go mad.
You could easily fall into that.
So Carpenter combined both styles of horror into one movie. Welcome back. You probably don't even realize it, but we have changed to Studio D at Rivermont Studios, and due to unforeseen circumstances with Studio A.
Lawnmower Man.
And Lawnmower Man. So that, again, getting sort of behind the scenes kind of thing, we've been contemplating the idea of building just a dedicated shop where you could smoke pipes. But the inherent problem is the number one thing with smoking pipes indoors is ventilation. You don't want to get smoked out. But then the number one thing when you want to do a podcast is soundproofing.
Right.
So it's unless you're willing to spend thousands of dollars on a ventilation system, there's no way to do a soundproofing podcasting pipe smoking studio. Right. It just doesn't happen. So for the most part, I think we just generally realize that you're gonna hear sounds.
You're gonna hear something, yeah. And well, it's not really that bad because we are smoking on a porch.
Yeah.
And what better place to smoke than on a porch? For Southerners at least. So you can get the kind of the ambiance of and the sort of sounds of what that is like. And
that is like the positive of being a pipe smoker in the South is it never really gets too cold to be on your porch.
Not really.
You just put on extra layers, maybe a portable heater. That's really all you'll need. I sort of feel bad for Michigan pipe smokers and Canadian pipe smokers.
Right.
The winter must be hell.
Yeah, I would not enjoy that. Of course, it's kind of funny you'd say that, but then I feel like you would be right at home in Alaska, but also feel like you just do everything inside in Alaska.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Whatever transcends, you're comfortable in the South, but you go further north and you get more and more uncomfortable, and then eventually you break that northern barrier where it's just like, I do what I want.
Yeah, nobody ever comes here. What does it matter? I'm here alone. But to get back to what we were talking about, I think we were sort of talking about the different ideas of horror, and we read the short story Color Out of Space, and that led into the film. So the film came out, I believe, in 2019 or was it 2018?
2019.
Richard Stanley film.
Right.
Nicolas Cage, same producers. I think Elijah Wood is one of them. The same producers that did Mandy.
Spectre Studios.
Yeah, Spectre Vision. I think.
Spectre Vision.
Yeah, something
Spectre
like that.
Vision. Yeah.
'Cause I sort of like their logo, the way it comes together,
Right.
and it almost looks like a D20 die.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see the S and the V, and I'm like, that's pretty interesting. The company I work for does something similar with their logo, but either way, yeah. So the producers that did this did Mandy, which I think you enjoyed.
I loved Mandy.
Yeah. So really, Nick Cage and Tommy Chong are the only people of relevance actors.
Oh, the wife has been in several movies. She was in The Patriot, and she was in God, I can't off the top of my head remember all the films she's been in, but she's not unknown.
Yeah,
it actually shocked me that she was in it.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about actors, right? There's actors that are unknown that you've never seen before. There's actors that you know, but you never know their name, and then there's the actors you know. And then there's sort of a...
Tommy Chong and Nicolas Cage are definitely the prominent ones that stand out in mind. The wife's a British actress, and she's been in several British films and a couple of American ones and stuff. And I know her, but I don't... it doesn't really stand out in my head.
Now, like I said, from the perspective of the short story, right? It was a pretty straightforward story. Really liked it. An opportunity missed in the movie. So the movie, there's a little bit of a change. So the short story is, a surveyor is there to survey the reservoir because they're going to dam it. They're going to flood it. And he is being told a story that happened in 1882.
Right.
In the movie, the story happens for the surveyor. Right. He's not being retold the story.
Which I think is a better push.
It is a better push, but I will say it is a missed opportunity for marketability with Stranger Things and everything 80s being such a big thing. They easily could have done the exact same thing, and they could have been referencing 1982. And you could have got all that 80s nostalgia that everybody loves. Now, for me, enjoying the movie, I don't care. But if they was trying to market it a little bit, you sort of hit the what's cool to do, they could have done that.
If you wanted to make money, yes. I do like that. So I just really don't want to run a bunch of rabbits here. Because you really want to stay on point. But I will try to make a quick point. Maybe we can entertain it another day. I do think that the trend to do 80s nostalgia, this is a tidbit. I understand it's nostalgia, which actually sort of negates my argument, but there is an ease to writing when you don't have cell phones, when you're not so connected. And it's interesting to see a modern take on a horror film that actually circumvents technology. There are some cliche things where you're sort of out in the sticks and you don't have the best reception. And they do make, passing acknowledgments of internet being finicky, satellite being finicky, cell reception, phone reception being finicky. But, it does take more thought, really, to get beyond technology, which I think is why people love the 80s. Because, see, the thing is if you're in the middle of a street in 80s New York, unless there's a payphone nearby, you're pretty much on your own. Nowadays, you can pretty much reach help in any portion of a civilized area. I mean, I really don't. I really don't have areas. I think I've crossed the Tennessee River a couple of times and lost cell reception, and that's in the middle of the river. I haven't even lost cell reception going over Lake Pontchartrain in Louisiana. You just don't have a moment where you're not connected.
It definitely, from creating a new type of horror, it definitely creates a new hurdle that people have to jump.
Because I mean, it's interesting to look at the new Halloween movies. They're running and screaming. I'm like, aren't you teenagers with cell phones?
Yeah.
Like what? And then it's this the town is sizable, but there's also just one cop. Like, how is that
Yeah.
even possible? You know, it's like, I mean, we're having an issue right now in the country where people want to reduce police force, but there's this mythical town in,
Illinois.
Illinois that has one police, and they don't struggle with any of the other problems that other, like, mid-sized cities struggle with. They have this white masked psychopath who's murdering people, and they just have the one cop. If anything, maybe Halloween produced more police force after the 70s movie. People are like, this one cop show, that's all we need right now is a Michael Myers, and then it's just gotten out of control.
Yeah.
That's a weird aside, but I mean, it's always strange to me that they only have the one cop. I swear every movie is that is the ultimate cliche. It's just the one cop.
Yeah, like Jaws, one cop.
And they have a partner, but they're never around.
They're never around.
Like he has a literal deputy or something, or sergeant, whatever it might be. He has one, but then he goes to the oceanographer.
Yeah,
and the psychopathic ship captain. Like that's his police force is some upscale city slicking oceanographer, and then this like blue collar working class hero shrimp captain or something. I don't even know what he's voting for. When you go into his thing and it's just like, I just hunt sharks. I'm like, there's a market for that? Like,
there's a market for hunting sharks, but this is the first time that the police need to be involved.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, Jaws is one of my favorite movies, but like there are limits when you start to break down the aspects of the story. The one cop, and then like in a modern sense, the cell phone. But Richard Stanley has a way of getting around that by making the color interfere with cell and internet reception.
It ties into
and
the
it
story.
sort of does alienate you even more from the rest of the world.
Yeah,
which I thought worked. Like I like that because that seems like from a writer's perspective, like because I write a little bit. It does take more.
Yeah, it's a convenient way to tie the story into a reason,
right?
And and then another thing, sort of, I was going to bring this up earlier, talking about the color being, we can't perceive new color. So the film sort of just went like a weird magenta, and actually the color gets like more and more like fluorescent as the movie goes. Maybe it starts off very light magenta, and then it's almost, I guess, fades into a purple, like towards the end of the movie, which was a cool idea. Granted, I found it really hard to believe when Nick Cage is over here like, some color I've never seen. I'm like, it's magenta. Just tell him it's magenta.
Right.
Like, which magenta, actually the science behind magenta is very strange. The color, I remember reading something about how we should not perceive magenta. It's actually a weird thing.
Oh.
Maybe that's why they chose that color. I don't know.
Maybe.
It was this thing I was reading where technically brown doesn't exist. Brown is just a different hue of orange. But we'll get to that another day.
I think with all it's a good movie. It's got a lot of elements of body horror, and it does do a lot of callbacks to the 80s. Specifically, I think The Thing is very prominent in it, which is very Lovecraftian. I think if you had to list movies that are Lovecraftian, not Lovecraft, this is a Lovecraft movie, so naturally it's Lovecraftian. But The Thing would be Lovecraftian in its execution. It's not based on anything that Lovecraft wrote. However, it has very specific Lovecraft elements. Yep. And I think that, Stanley saw that and sort of cued into that. They do a really good job of sort of creating the abominations that the color creates, be it this weird amalgam of animals or this distortion of the natural life around, and how everything is affected by this meteorite.
And the surveyor, I actually really enjoyed that actor. I really thought that
very good.
Yeah, he was a very good actor.
Everyone in it is pretty good, minus Nicolas Cage, who's for some reason. So Nicolas Cage used to be really good, in my opinion. I think he was a good actor, but everyone sort of gave him kind of up the road about being an overactor. I swear, like, now I think he's just trolling people
Yeah.
because every movie I see him in going forward, he seems to be getting more and more
Yeah.
like ham, which is so strange because I was like, man, I know you've got good acting chops because I've seen it, like,
I guess he just swerved into it. He's just like, y'all
and
think
he's
I'm
just like,
doing it?
you think I'm doing it, so I'm gonna do it. And now it just like every scene with him, he's just chewing it up.
The funny thing though about him, so I didn't really find anything jarring about his performance except for 3 to 4 or 5 times he almost did a Trump impression in some of his way he talked. It sounded like he was doing a Trump impression. I don't know if that's just the times we live in, but I was like, man, that's so eerie. Like, I don't know if he's doing that on purpose or if that's just the way he is.
He has a breakdown in a car that was pretty, like, over the top. I was like, geez, like, tone it back a little bit.
When there's a confrontation that he has with the daughter, and I was just like, man, that escalated way too fast.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a scene there's a scene that's pure genius. It might have been done before, but it's the first time I've seen it, and it was so eerie that I love it. But then there was also a scene that unnerved me so much I had to stop the movie and come back to it later. The scene, so spoilers for anybody. So if you don't want to hear this, just stop right now. There's a part where you'll know it as soon as I start talking about it, where she's cutting carrots.
Yeah.
And she's sort of just in the zone, like the wife is. And Nicolas Cage is yelling at her because they sort of made him look like an idiot. Well, he sort of made himself look like an idiot on the news. Mm-hmm. And he's hollering at her like, come in here, see this. And she's cutting the carrots. And the little boy comes in and is like, Mom. And right when he gets there, she chops off her two of her fingers, it looks like. And like blood splashes on his face and he runs. Now, that's not the part that's genius. What I loved was the little kid runs in there and is like, Dad, something's wrong with Mom. And then the camera's behind her and she just turns and like waves him and was like, dinner's ready. And like she didn't even realize she cut her fingers off. Right. I thought that was great. That was a great scene.
Right.
It was really interesting.
That's the scene that unnerved you?
No, that's the scene I loved. I love that scene. The scene that unnerved me...
Well, before you said that, the carrot scene was interesting because I've seen that scene play out several times and they never execute what you think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Even I was like, okay, and then like looks like she's going to chop off her finger. Yeah. And then she's going to be like, what, honey? And you're going to be like, oh, that was close. The kid saved her. But no. She lops off those fingers.
Yeah. But the icing on top was her so unaware of it. And she just looked back and like, you see her head, or you see the side of her face, you see her fingers chopped off, and she's just like, dinner's ready. Like she did not even know she did it.
Right.
That was so interesting. You've seen things like that where it's building up and you know what's going to happen, but it never does.
Right.
But that one just did it, and I was like, it's sort of a part of a new thing in horror that I think is happening, where it's really more with jump scares. Jump scares, they happened, right? And when the first evolution of a jump scare, it just happened, and the music happened with it. So like there was no build up. Then we got to the build up, and then we got to there's a build up, and then nothing, and then boom, jump scare. Right. Now there's a coming back of just jump scaring, right? No build up, just jump scare. That's sort of that. It's in that same vein of we're gonna just do it. We're just going to do it, and you're going to experience it. The scene that unnerved me, that I had to like stop, was there's a part where the color is chasing the two sons, and one of the sons falls, the younger son, and then the older one keeps running, and then the mom runs out and grabs the little boy, but then the color gets him, and then they're like merging into one thing, and that was so like just I couldn't handle it. Right. Like that when they're laying on the couch and they're making their noises and they're forming into one. I was like, oh god. So I stopped the movie, simmered on it, and came back a couple of days later and sort of just finished it from there.
Richard Stanley does a pretty good job of like collectively taking the beats of the stories that really do work and filtering them into the movie, but putting a modern lens on it. I think that the movie does really do justice to the story.
Yeah.
But it's not limited to the way the story was limited. Like, the story doesn't really work as a straight film.
Yeah.
But the way Stanley did it makes it work, which is nice. So usually I don't say that. Usually I say, why don't you just basically, use the story.
Yeah.
The story structure makes sense. The story structure does not make sense for film. It's a good story, but it's not a filmable story.
Yeah.
So he did things that I liked. To a story that really did need a revamping. He sort of gave everyone a purpose. Everyone, it's not like... not everyone's going to have a specific arc that you get to witness. You're really just witnessing really horrifying things.
Yeah.
You're not going to get, but they all have purpose, and that's nice.
Yeah. There's pre-existing built-up tension amongst the family members that is true, but you don't see that in the story.
That's right.
Because it is told from so many perspectives that little internal dramas amongst a family would not carry over in a retelling. But because he didn't make it a retelling, he made it, it's all happening. The surveyor is involved in the story.
Which is, I think gives the whole thing, more substance because you get to experience it from really the narrator. Yeah. And Stanley pulled, I think it was tweaked a teensy bit, but he pulled really specific dialogue from the story.
Yep.
The narration is almost verbatim.
Yeah. The opening and the ending is identical almost. But I think that sort of goes into the idea that I always have a hard time. So say they had did what I did for money's sake. Say the surveyor shows up and then he's being told a story that happens in 1982.
Right. What's
always bothered me when you do a real flashback is you do see all the little intricacies and the little nuances. I'm like, the person telling the story would not have told that. That wouldn't even... The person who's telling the story wouldn't even know to include those details.
Exactly. But, that's the thing. It's like you sort of have to set up an amount of disbelief.
Yeah.
Which is also like the whole unreliable narrator shtick that I was talking about. It shouldn't matter, but it does.
Yeah. Well, it's all about believing that you're in the world. You want to be in the world.
Right.
You want to escape. You want to feel like you're there. And those little things matter.
Right.
Those little things.
Now, there have been instances where I've read other things. Okay, so Color Out of Space is very similar to a novel called The Fisherman. Almost has this exact same premise, except not a color. Literally, they're building a reservoir. And there is some entity there that, I don't want to... we can talk about that some other time. I'll reread it. But it's got a very similar theme where it's even a reservoir, and it's the whole story is about someone in the past, but then they go to the protagonist at the beginning of the story, and then he tells his point of view from this. So the thing that happened in the past happened, but then fast forward to the present, and he has his story. Yeah. So he tells the history, and then he tells what he witnessed, and that really did combine it. So if the protagonist had to experience something, I think Color Out of Space would be elevated. In other words, if the portion that you read as the story was part one, and then part two was, this is now what the real issue is with the reservoir or whatever, I think it gives it a little bit more substance. Yeah. And then it cauterizes everything. Even though in the novel, the history portion is actually, I think, longer than the present portion, it's still it's sort of just sewed it up real nice.
Yeah, which again, like you've said before, Color Out of Space sort of fixed that by just not going back in time, just making it all there.
And I think that's like I said, as far as an adaptation and everything and the way it was set, was really good. And even they had interesting calls to Miskatonic University. Yep. They had calls to Arkham, Kingsport, and the protagonist, which we're going to assume is the surveyor, had a copy of The Willows.
Which goes into the other story that we read.
So Algernon Blackwood, the guy who inspired the Dr. Silence Pipe, is sort of the theming of this podcast, right, or this episode. wrote The Willows, which Lovecraft said was one of the better English written supernatural stories. So we read that, and ironically, we saw it in the film.
Yep.
And it has a lot of relations to The Color Out of Space, not the film, but the story, in that it's very, where you're sort of immersed into a world, and there's a heavy hand to the natural environment and what happens when something alien sort of encapsulates that environment. And with Color Out of Space, it's very cosmic. In this, it's very supernatural, almost other dimensional, spiritual.
Yep.
I think if I had to do it, I would say the fear of natural horror versus the fear of cosmic horror.
Yep.
Cosmic horror being Color Out of Space and Lovecraft, and this natural, supernatural horror being The Willows.
And I would say, sort of a callback to what you were saying about Carpenter and being the two different types of horror. What really, I like The Willows a lot. What was interesting is I believe I watched the Color Out of Space movie, then I read The Willows, excuse me, and then I read Color Out of Space. And what was interesting, again, I've never really liked the actual writing of Lovecraft. And when I went through The Willows, I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Why can't Lovecraft be like this? This is very palatable. I understand what's happening. I can feel it. It's atmospheric. And then, of course, I read Color Out of Space, and I'm like, okay, well, there we go. I can see Lovecraft can do that. It's just the ones that I've read.
His character, like, I think Blackwood's characters in The Willows have agency, and they have purpose.
Yeah.
You know, they have survival mechanics. Not to say that the detectives or Ami or, you know, Nahum, right? Didn't have that. I just feel like it's a little bit more fleshed out with Blackwood.
Yeah. But what I was going to say about it is, what I really enjoyed about The Willows was the first 2/3 of it feels more like just how, from my perspective, how most people feel when they're going on a camping trip, right? You sort of, you may see things that are weird, but you don't know if it's really weird or if it's your mind playing tricks on you. So you have that sort of, you don't know. And that's, in a way, the essential conflict between the Carpenter point. Is it, are you afraid of what's out there that you can't see? Or are you afraid of your own self, the monster among us? That's sort of what happens in that first little bit. At least that's how I've related to it, is that, am I projecting something out there, or am I actually perceiving some kind of threat? You know, and a lot of times, you know, you simply go, well, that's just my mind playing tricks on me, which is like an internal thing that you have to deal with. But then when it becomes real, then you're like, oh, okay, well, now your mind sort of has to reconfigure, like, okay, now I need to protect myself, kind of thing. Now, granted, it doesn't go all the way there, because it gets sort of alternate reality-ish, or, you know, different dimensions. But that first 2/3, that's the feeling I was getting. I was like, maybe that's where it's going. It didn't completely go that way, but that's what I was getting at.
The interesting thing is it is the two stories juxtaposed. Is the Willows is the civilized man versus the untamed environment.
Yeah.
And then that untamed environment has a sort of pagan-y, spiritual kind of dimensioning to it. Even talks about like the thinning veil between worlds.
Yeah.
While ironically, the Color Out of Space is the rustic man versus what could be described as a civilized thing. Now, I'm not saying that the color itself is civilized, but he does interact with a more civilized populace, people who want to investigate the meteorite, and people who listen to a story and laugh at it. It does have these weird things where it's sort of the inverse, where the thing that is cosmically scary is even more so pronounced with the rustic man, versus the civilized man being unnerved by the natural environment. One's allowing their fear, if we're looking at it objectively, and then you could sort of extract the horror components from it. One is fearful of what would be the unknown and natural environment, the untamed environment,
Mm-hmm.
versus the rustic man who is fearful of what could be perceived as civilized, progressive things in terms of the way you're coming through the world. Because they're going to study it, they're going to rationalize it, and they're going to give him like an answer. While he has no answers, he's just like, it's an unknown color that burns and it saps a life, and that's all he knows. He knows from his very elemental stance, while the civilized people know from their more like, well, this is the mechanics to survive.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and these are what we objectively observe, and anything else is just sort of your mind.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, and I think I like the Willows better.
As a story or as a concept?
I can only base on the emotion of reading it,
Okay,
and the
so
atmosphere that's built.
I guess like the story. You think it's better? It's well written, because I think Color Out of Space actually has a better premise.
Yeah. The Willows is very baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very simple idea. It's just two guys canoeing down,
you know, the Danube, and then they land and make camp on an island that seems to be a nexus point between our realm and another realm. It's not talking about, you know, extra dimensional terrestrials or anything like that. They're not. You're not even sure what it is.
It sort of leaves it up to you.
It sort of gives you kind of like, it definitely doesn't describe.
Yeah.
You have an idea that you're looking at what would be pagan gods in a natural environment. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
While Color Out of Space is kind of a known quantity, even though it's unknown. You know sort of what's going on. It gives it a little bit more substance. However, you only see it through the eyes of the protagonist and the characters interacting with it, which actually give it a coat of malevolent force. But there is nothing like, if you look at it just from like a natural environment, there's nothing malevolent about it. Yeah. It's doing exactly what it needs to do. It's killing everything out for an energy source so it can ascend back into space. Yeah. That's exactly what it's doing.
It sort of, it crash landed to get fuel.
Right. And then that's all it did. And then it absorbed everything that it needed to, and then, you know, reascended back into space.
Which you pointed to in our earlier conversations about it. The Willows does something a little different. It sort of contradicts itself in that aspect of what's the intent of the thing that you don't know.
Right. They do suggest that they're so insignificant, which is the interesting thing between both stories. The insignificance of humanity is this really scary thing. And it's the same way that, you know, I approached Patrick with a question, you know, if there were a colony of ants in your backyard, is it malevolent to kill them or not? Well, to the ants, if the ants have, you know, a much higher sentience than what we perceive them as having, it's malevolent. This is an invader who's trying to kill them. That's what it looks like. But to us, it's just business as usual. Like, there's an ant bed in my yard, I want to destroy it. But, like, they don't feel anything. Well, that's the same thing with, like, cosmic horror to me. They're and I guess to a certain extent, the Willows, it's so indifferent. Humanity is so whatever. Yeah. That it doesn't matter. And that's what's really scary about it, is that you can't really assign evil or malevolence to that thing because we're that insignificant. The same way that the Color Out of Space views everything that it crashed around as fuel. Yeah. The Willows, all the entities in that, would seemingly think that we're insignificant. Ironically, it does twist that a little bit because the Swede gets it in his mind that to sort of escape it, there has to be some sort of sacrifice in play. But
then I'm wondering, is that just the way Blackwood wrote that character? That character was trying to justify what was happening.
Yeah, and you know, as much rationalizing as the protagonist does, that's probably what's happening.
Yeah. But Blackwood didn't really intend for that to be the case.
But he also was the one that said we're so indifferent. The Swede said that, and then the Swede tried to sacrifice himself. It's almost like the only thing I can say that would kind of give credence to the whole thing is that you don't know so much that you sort of have to, that the Swede probably hit the nail on the head at the beginning by saying it's indifferent to our existence.
Yeah.
But then had to re-rationalize it out of fear.
And well, see, that's when I was reading it. There was a moment where it felt like the Swede and the main character swapped their presence in the story. So, like, leading up to it, the Swede was the no nonsense. This is what it is, and he doesn't really entertain ideas of fantastical.
Yeah, I think the protagonist even says that he's very unimaginative.
Yeah, but I think there is a moment where it swaps, where the Swede, because of fear, gives into that, and I think that's what led to that contradiction in his saying.
Well, fear is the mind killer.
It is. Call back to that one. What's funny is, I'm going to chase a small rabbit. I haven't read into this enough. I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. But you were talking about ants, right? The ants, if they could conceive thoughts that way, they would consider us malevolent.
Right.
Is it too much of a stretch to ponder that the universe can only handle one type of, not species, but one type of organisms that can perceive that way? So it would be one thing to think that ants did perceive us, from that perspective. But because we do think that way, and we know ants don't think that way, can there even possibly be can there be a point to where we are the ants and something else isn't? Because can the universe handle that? Two things that can think to that level. Granted, what would be above us would think to a higher level, but it's still that same. It's just an, I guess, higher evolved version. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I know ants can communicate with one another, but they don't know. They can't. It's like what we talked about with the dune, the animal. An animal cannot perceive, like, if I go through a little bit of pain now, at least I'll live. They just want to make sure that they're not feeling pain. Where humans can be like, I'll go through a little bit of pain and but at least I won't die.
Right.
Can that even happen at a higher even level? Like, does that even make sense that there would be something that would be that way?
Well, I mean, you got to look at it like, if that isn't the case, say, right, then there is a definite stopping point for us to keep ascending.
Yeah.
So, if look at, I'll use vegan as an example. People have gotten to a point that they think meat is such an abomination and so cruel that they would forego eating meat and only stick to plant-based products. Right? I'm not judging. I'm not saying just it's whatever.
Yeah.
So that probably, isn't the newest concept in the world, but I imagine if you go back 1,000 years, it's probably even more rare, if not definitely not even, it's probably non-existent if you go pre-agrarian.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, you would have to assume that a higher consciousness has to basically stop evolving at a certain point. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a limitation to which the mind reaches. So I don't know. What I'm saying is I don't know.
Yeah. Because I was just trying to think.
Because you would assume that we were more elevated than our ancestors.
Yeah.
So there has to be something even more so elevated than us in a future timeline or potentially out in space.
But that's what I was sort of getting at. So,
but the thing is if you're so much higher, if you think on a level, let's say that you have perfect pitch with the universe, right?
Yeah.
And what goes along with that philosophy in that perfect pitch scenario is that there is no death, there's no life, that everything is essentially matter, and that matter is just, reconstituted to something else. Then killing would be, you would be basically unfettered to kill or destroy or take whatever you wanted to, and it wouldn't be malevolent to you, just like getting rid of the ants so they don't sting your kid or you in the yard is no more evil in your eyes.
Yeah. They sort of touch on similar ideas in the Watchmen show. Similar. I don't know. I know we've discussed the show in a small capacity,
Right.
but it sort of gets touched on in a way. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I was just trying to think because I'm
Well,
like,
I'm just saying that's just something to think about.
yeah, because there's no, you used ants in our example. There is no thing that you could replace ants with that does understand and perceive why we're doing it. Like nothing out there would understand that. Only thing that would be another human. So, which I guess that's sort of getting Holocausty in a way. But like even then, it was whatever. I don't know. That's a different topic for a different day.
Right.
Either way, the Willows definitely I can see.
And like I
the
said, I'm not
influences.
justifying wholesale murder or anything like
Oh,
that.
no.
I'm just saying, like, if there were something where you would assume matter is any, I mean, you're just matter, I'm matter, and then like us dead is just reconstituted matter, fertilizer, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that like you should shrug off morals. I'm just saying, like, in that scenario, a higher consciousness who believes that doesn't see the difference between states, maybe potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, at that point, because your conscious is something separate than your matter, would a consciousness ever get to that point? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Because
I mean, like, you're basically talking about like what every metaphysical or spiritual or religious argument that's ever been concocted. This is some deep philosophy where it's like, is there something, I guess more pure than our own consciousness? Is there something more elevated than our own consciousness? I mean, I don't know. We only have the one thing to compare it to, plus whatever we can imagine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those things. It's like, what's the perception of God, or whatever? I mean, like, how do you perceive something like that? I mean, it's kind of like the same thought that I have on, like, atheism to a certain extent, where people say that they don't believe in God, and I feel like that is just as faith-filled as like belief in God. And it almost, to me, I'm not trying to offend atheists, this is just a personal take, it almost to me has a kind of a contradictory element, because the only thing that could literally disprove a God would in fact probably be a God. Like, I feel like the thing that could disprove it would, at this state, and for everyone in the world, would at least have a minor godsend. I mean, it would probably be omniscient, at least, and potentially omnipotent, if it could disprove it, with, zero fallibility. It would probably be perceived by us as a god. So it's sort of like one of those things where it's like we're limited by our own abilities to imagine beyond.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. So try not to think of it like in a philosophic sense, not in that I'm arguing that you're wrong if you're listening to this and frustrated. It's just the things that we comprehend at this level are so limited that even the things that we could potentially disprove would in fact be disproven by the entity that was disproving it. So like anything that could just with certainty say that there is no God, we would probably potentially believe is a God. That's the limitations of humanity, I think.
Yeah, because because you can't prove a God doesn't exist. Like a human can't.
Right, we can't. But the thing that
would have to be something that knew.
Yeah, or like would potentially have all of the credentials that would at least give you a Greek god.
Yeah, yeah. But even on that instance, like like you were saying about, like you said, not believing in a god is as much faith based as believing in a god, because you're putting it up to faith because you can't prove one way or the other.
Right. But but if those things are provable,
it would have to be by God.
It would be by something that would be perceived essentially by us, by definition, as a god.
Yeah.
And that, in and of itself, I'm not saying that disproves them.
No.
I'm just saying that in and of itself shows you the limitations of the human mind and consciousness. It's not an argument for or against anything. It's just an argument in the terms of our limitations. Like, I'm saying that we're so limited. I think Isaac Asimov, who's a famous atheist, so I'll quote a famous atheist for you atheists out there who are frustrated with me, said that, science by definition is advanced enough, would be perceived as magic. So that's probably a more digestible thing. It's like there is a form of science to you and I that would look like magic. It would be unexplainable.
Yes.
It's the limitations of your understanding.
Yep. And you just take that idea into what you're saying, which is, again, like you said, not an argument. It's a philosophical thought.
Right. And it's like, this is one of those things. It's just a personal stance on it too. Hopefully no one got super upset. Now, we made it. We made it through this, guys.
Yeah, we made it.
But that's just a thought on it. It's like, it does seem that, to your point, is there a higher consciousness? Well, the only thing that could prove it, in a sense,
would be a
higher consciousness.
Yeah. I don't know. Just that's where my mind went. I've never really delved into the idea of consciousness.
Well, it's got a little complicated. Sorry, we got all a little off track. But The Willows, great story.
Yeah, any of these stories, the Color Out of Space is a good read, especially during October. Willows is a great one to read. I say October just because of Halloween. You can watch it anytime and enjoy it, or read it. And then the film is a good adaptation.
It's a very good adaptation. It's very good. It's very interesting. Stayed really true to the story,
but giving it good updates.
But giving it updates that were really good.
So. I'll just end with this. I really enjoyed the final narration, from a cinematic standpoint.
The final shot of the reservoir and then the over river with a valley was pretty magnificent.
Yeah, and like I said, that actor was just a good actor. Yeah, like just the way he was doing it all.
Even his age makeup was pretty good.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah.
But yeah, guys, check it out.
Yeah, hopefully you stayed with us.
Yeah, I know we kind of went on quite a tangent, several, but I mean, I guess that was actually relatively organized for us, and we'll hopefully start tightening it up more and more.
Yeah, that was because I definitely think some people do enjoy the ramble, the rabbit hole chasing.
So I don't think we'll ever be able to get away from it.
It's just the nature of us.
Yeah.
Which makes it fun. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll look forward to doing the next episode. So till the next time.
See y'all.